Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of SNEED-CAST. I'm your host Alexa, and today our special guest is none other than Brian Greene, who happens to be the CEO and president of the Houston Foodbank. So hello Brian, thank you so much for joining us on SNEED-CAST.
Well, thank you for coming here. I mean, you had to travel to get to me, so I just walked into the room.
Oh, but this is great. A little intro on Brian. So he actually earned his master's in economics from the University of Tennessee. He's been the CEO for the Houston Foodbank now for over 20 years, or getting to 20 years now?
19 years.
19 years, so getting there. And then you've also been an executive director or also a president for another another food bank, correct?
Yeah, this is my third food bank in the Feeding America system. So I started 36 years ago in Knoxville, Tennessee with the food bank there. And then I went to the food bank in New Orleans. I was there for 12 years and then moved here 19 years ago.
Wow. And then I know that since you've become the CEO here, you've helped to increase distribution, and then this is actually one of the largest food banks in the world, correct?
Yeah, although, you know, the reality of the Feeding America food banks is they've all grown very significantly. We started off to tap into surplus food with the thinking that, wow, you know, people who are going hungry, there's all this wasted food.
Right.
We're going to have these organizations to go get it and channel it to them. And the reality is there's just billions and billions of pounds of wasted food. So the opportunities have been immense, and so yeah, we do so much more, and that's true all over the country and now becoming more all over the world.
Right. And then with 36 years in the industry, what is it that really got you started, or what is it that called your attention to the food bank space?
Well, when I started, I thought that this was going to be a temporary do-gooder stint. I was going to kind of check the box, you know, oh, I did something good before I went to finish get into my academic career. I was wanting to be an economics professor. But I also wanted to work in a charity that did hunger or homelessness, so I would have ideas for a dissertation. This was in the early days of food banks, and so the board there, rather foolishly, hired me as the CEO there because I'd never run anything.
Right.
But anyway, it was like, I don't know how many other people wanted the job at that point. So anyway, I just absolutely fell in love with the work because even at the small scale we were then, just the magnitude of how many people we can help and just how much we can help them, and was very gratifying, as well as the logistical challenges and all just the business questions that you have to answer to do this well have made it continually interesting. And then we frankly have had so many successes in the work that it feels a lot better than it hurts.
And then with so many gratifying and successful experiences that you have had, what would you say are some of your most memorable projects that you've worked on?
Well, so there's probably the thing that is most memorable now is just the overall shift in the thinking. As I mentioned, when we first were doing food banks in the early days, the thinking was, our theory of change was, if we just got enough of this surplus food to the people in need, we would have no hunger in the U.S. If that theory of change was correct, we'd have no hunger in the U.S. today because we're actually doing more food than theoretically was all we needed back then. And so we had to either just kind of stick our heads in the sand and pretend, you know, that, oh no, everything's fine, this is working, or really kind of shift our thinking. And that's one of the things I'm rather proud of, is I think I was one of the people that really helped push the network to be shifting our thinking and say, look, absolutely helping families with food, this is a good thing, but we're not going to end the problem this way, even on a day-to-day basis, because we were underestimating just how much food is just part of the larger equation of why people are struggling. They're not just struggling to pay their grocery bill, they're struggling to pay their rent and their utility bills, and so thinking that you could solve one problem in isolation was naive of us. And so we've really changed our strategy to be thinking in terms of how do we use the food to not just think about hunger, but how do we support other initiatives, other organizations, other missions that are trying to help people not need food banks. So we do things like food scholarships, where we work with community colleges and universities for students who are low income and financially being able to stay in school, or just to be able to balance all the challenges of all the work and all the other stressors, where if we can give them not just some emergency food assistance, but rather a significant amount of food, like a scholarship level value to them, to try and help financially stabilize those students, we can impact graduation rates. which then reduces the number of people who need us in the first place.
Right.
So strategies like that and the food prescriptions, working with healthcare organizations to try and change wellness, are the ways that we've shifted our thinking, and I'm very proud of that.
Wow, it really does sound like you guys do so much great work. Talking about all of the ongoing programs, how do you guys make it all possible? Like with corporate sponsorships, donations, that sort of thing.
Yeah, one of the big surprises in food banks is how complex this has become. First off, the magnitude is so much larger than people realize. So the food banks combined in the United States, or take Feeding America is just like that, the amount of food channeled through Feeding America. If you think of that as a resource, like how much resources are being given to charities? Well, the largest foundation in the world is the Gates Foundation. You think about, well, how much dollar value do they provide to charities? It's deep into the billions. Feeding America actually is larger when you think of the dollar value what's being provided. That has given us the opportunity to be, very impactful in what we do. But it's also meant that it's like we're not just going to be simple logistics organizations. Just we're going to get the food and give it wherever it wants to go, kind of path of least resistance.
Right.
The decisions that have to be made are so much more complex. The need to utilize data in pretty sophisticated ways, grows significantly. So like here, we have a 10-person data team. We have data engineers, we have data analysts,
Right.
to try and help us be able to make better decisions on how we have the most impact. And all of these things have just made, it's more complex, but we think we're getting so much more value and so much more difference in people's lives as a result.
Alrighty, Brian, so we talked a little bit about what's currently going on, but what would you say the future holds? What are we doing to prepare?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there's been a lot of change in food banking. In the early days, we were overwhelmingly handling dry goods.
Right.
And when people actually, even today, when they think of a food bank, they probably think of like macaroni and cheese and cereal and canned goods. And you think about it, like how many people even buy canned vegetables anymore? So that's really not much of what is available as a resource, and it's probably not the healthiest way for us to be distributing vegetables.
Right.
So right now, even today, it's almost half of our distribution is fresh fruits and vegetables. So we've really changed what we do, which means we needed to change the capacities that we have, as well as the partners we work with. So if you look out at our fleet, every vehicle out there, we run over 60 trucks a day here just in Houston. And every one of those vehicles is a refrigerated vehicle, so it can handle frozen, refrigerated, or dry.
Right.
And then when we're doing the distributions, we have these mobile units that they look like beer trucks with the side doors. But again, that's also refrigerated, so we can do dry, frozen, refrigerated in order to do this distribution. As we look to the future, from a product standpoint, I see a day where our distribution will be 70% plus fresh produce. Now that might sound like, well, wait a minute, that's too much fruits and vegetables. Well, you can think of it this way. Produce, fruits and vegetables, is supposed to be half of your plate. That's what the dietitians tell us, right? We currently only account for about 10% of the plate for the food insecure population. We are not providing all their needs, and we never will be that large, okay? So if half of your plate is supposed to be fruits and vegetables, we're only 10% of the plate. We could double it purely on fruits and vegetables and still nowhere near, too much of that. But that is where there is the most surplus, because there's still billions and billions of pounds of fruits and vegetables that are grown in the United States and elsewhere, that it's too small, the wrong shape, it's got a branch abrasion where it's perfectly good, it's just not what they call retail beautiful.
Right.
Ugly produce is another term. That's a great resource, and it's also the healthiest stuff that we can do. So we're trying to transform aggressively to add more and more fresh fruits and vegetables to our distribution, and I see that as with food banks all over the country as a direction that we're going, and so we're building the capacity to do that.
Right. And then I know in one of your previous interviews you had mentioned that it's easier for the public to access unhealthy foods than it is healthy foods. Here at the food bank, do you guys offer any resources for educating the public on like the healthy foods that you guys do provide or do distribute?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it turns out that it's actually harder than that. Yeah,
Okay.
so yes, a major challenge is that especially in incomes that are lower income, or I'm sorry, especially in neighborhoods with lower incomes, they're more likely to be what's called a food desert. A food desert is when you don't have within a reasonable distance access to a supermarket that sells healthy foods, or a grocery store that sells healthy foods,
Right.
more likely to be the processed foods and snacks, etc. And worse, even with access to the supermarket that has the good foods, the way our food supply in the United States has evolved, good nutrition is actually more expensive than poor nutrition. So there's just an affordability part, which helps drive why you see the food deserts.
Right.
Because the grocery stores, they can't sell if people can't afford to buy. So from our standpoint, we're trying to do a couple of things. We're trying to provide, okay, here's food assistance, and we're going to make this as nutritious as we can, because we know there's other obstacles outside of what we do. But then the other part is the more that people are demanding the healthy foods, the more that's what the supermarkets will do. The more that you don't have to be a big supermarket in order to do fresh fruits and vegetables, you need more of that population demanding the fresh fruits and vegetables. That's how you really solve the food desert problem.
Right.
But that is not just an education question. The reality is, everybody knows that you should be eating more fruits and
Right.
vegetables and less snacks and processed food. Everybody knows that. There's reasons why. All the way to portion control. If you buy onions and potatoes and carrots and celery, being able to not have waste in what you buy is a lot harder than if it's canned. Or see what I'm saying? So when you got to make sure that you don't waste money because you're really, really tight, that's a real challenge. So it's not just like, oh, we need to provide you with education.
Right.
I know this was it is. It's managed to make that a habit. And this is where, yes, we're providing the recipe information, the dietetic or the nutrition information, all that. We have dietitians on staff, and we do that work. But mostly what we're looking to do is how do we work with other organizations to try and make that a behavioral change, which requires a lot more in-depth work. So we have partnerships with Brighter Bites that does this kind of deep dive approach with families and has a much higher success rate of being able to flip households into being heavy produce consumers.
Whenever students go on, say, long breaks, so summer vacation, or we have Thanksgiving coming up, we have Christmas break coming up, what is it that the food bank does to help out? Because I know that sometimes we do rely on schools to help keep those students fed. So what is it that the food bank does during the holidays to help out?
Okay. So Alexa, you bring up a pretty good point about how there's seasonality to hunger
Right.
for young people. So contrary to what people assume, summer is hunger season for kids, overwhelmingly. The holidays a little bit less so, oddly enough.
Okay.
Because the holidays is when people have a tendency to be thinking more of it, and I almost envision it's almost like chasing people down to give them a turkey, because there's so much of a push for, this is the time that poor people want to eat or something, is what the community seems to think.
Right.
So Thanksgiving is there are a lot of resources happen at Thanksgiving, but people don't think of the summer months. So when you think about hunger for kids, the number one reason why kids don't go hungry, and most kids don't go hungry, it's actually about 1% of children in the U.S. actually have hunger. Okay. That's a lot less than the adults. The adult rate for hunger is about 5%. And you might say, well, why is that? Kids are more likely to live in households that are in poverty. Kids are more likely to live in households that are food insecure. Kids are more likely to live in households that experience hunger, yet the kids are less likely to go hungry. Now, the number one reason for that is the parents. What parent would not suffer before they let their child suffer, right? And so overwhelmingly, it's the parents who are the ones who are taking the hit. But for a lot of households, it's still in the millions, the money's completely out. There's nothing they can do. Everybody loses, right? Well, the second reason why children are less likely to go hungry is, as you implied, is the schools.
Right.
The school lunch and breakfast program is the largest child hunger fighting program in the United States. Not the food banks, the school lunch and breakfast program.
Right.
So from a kid's standpoint, it's when the kids are not in school is where there's the greatest exposure. So the weekends, holidays, but especially summer. So for the weekends, we do a program called the Backpack Buddy Club. And This is very common for food banks to do, where we're trying to provide a weekend supply. Because it's just something that teachers report over and over again. The kid, you can see that they're getting antsy before the weekend. You can see that they're really in bad shape on Monday. It's not until they're starting to eat again that they recuperate. So there's lots of symptoms that are shown. Those are fairly expensive programs to do, so we target those kind of like the cases only where the teachers identify they do not believe that child is eating on the weekend. So kind of the worst of the worst cases. Okay, and then you shift to the summer months. We do what's called summer food service program, where we use our kitchen, which normally makes after-school meals, to support programs like the Boys and Girls Club and YMCA's. That the real goal there is to encourage participation in those programs by giving the kids a meal.
Right.
And sure, for some kids that may be the only dinner they would have had. But mainly what we're trying to do is keep the kids in that program because they're more likely to graduate, and there's all these nice metrics that these programs are able to show. But come summer, we kind of say, nope, all bets are off. We've just got to get the food to these kids for those households that they now have to come up with 2 extra meals a day, and they got to do it for an extended period of time, and their income doesn't go up because it's summer. So that's when we really need to ramp up, and that's when we do the summer food service program, where we, instead of making it just for the after-school programs, we kind of blow the thing up, and we work with literally hundreds of sites to do the distribution of these hot meals.
Okay. And then you had touched on adult hunger as well, and you said that that's 5% compared to the 1% for kids. What programs do you guys offer for, say, like our senior citizens or like veterans or just adults that wouldn't necessarily be able to get access to food?
Yeah. So most of the volume that we do is for families. Overwhelmingly, for all the food banks around the country, the food is going to families, and the families have kids.
Right.
So when you're doing that, you're providing food for the whole household. That's how the adults are getting fed. In addition to that, there are specific programs for seniors. So we have a senior box program that provides a supplemental amount of food each month. And so in Houston's area, for instance, we serve about 12,000 seniors a month that way. But the way we really, when you think about targeting, it's the partnerships that we have. And this is true for the Feeding America food banks all over the country. So we have, in Houston, we have like 1,600 different partnerships, okay? The largest bulk of those are the schools. So we have the school markets, the Backpack Buddy Club, et cetera, where how do we get food in the households? The schools are these great resources in the neighborhoods. They know the families, and they can help us target. For veterans, we work with veterans organizations. And so we supply them to be able to supply the veterans, but we also then take the referrals from those programs to get into the pantry system. Okay, and then for wellness issues, it can be like people with diabetes, et cetera. We're working with the healthcare industry, where we work with health clinics, we work with hospital systems, where they identify the people who are having a wellness issue, who are also food insecure, and then they basically channel them into our system, and then we're able to provide them the feedback on are they actually getting the food they need, and they can track the results that way. So for kind of each group, the main way that we help is with the creative partnerships.
So we have talked about food insecurity and how it spikes during different seasons, but what about when we're dealing with pandemics such as like COVID-19? What was it like for the food bank here? What were you guys doing during that time?
Well, all the food banks experience a very similar phenomenon, and I've been through disasters before. There was a food bank with New Orleans, Katrina hit, food bank here when Harvey hit, et cetera. COVID was different than anything else we'd ever seen. The need spike was just crazy high. So if you go back, the first impact that happened was the shutdown. Right? Okay, everybody stay home except for essential workers, whatever that meant. The people who got hit by that were the hourly workers. Most businesses continued to pay their salary workers even though they were shut down. But the people who were hourly tended to not get paid at all. Well, by no coincidence, that's also the people who are less likely to have any savings. So it's like in the Houston area, which is fairly common, 46% of the households do not have $400 that they can call upon in an emergency. Okay, so they have no cushion. So if something goes wrong, they're just in trouble almost immediately.
Right.
Well, that's the phenomena that we saw when we had the shutdowns. Unlike, I'd never seen this even in a natural disaster, where just suddenly all these people, their income just went to zero just like that. And they were in trouble. They were in serious trouble. So the lines just went crazy long immediately. In addition, we had so many of our partners shut down because, again, nobody knows how's this going to work. Nobody wants to die. And so, oh my gosh, we got to stay isolated. We can't operate because these are mostly run by volunteers, because that's how we get most of the work done here. And this is true for food banks around the country. Most of our work is done by volunteers. Well, the volunteers, they weren't coming. So like, oh my gosh, we have all this extra work. We don't have the volunteers. We now have to kind of like make it less efficient for the staff because we're trying to keep people separated. So we had to bring in other people, coming in. The National Guard came in. We got funding to hire temporary workers, to kind of supplement the volunteers. But then we had to where's the food going to come from? Because you can't just, there's a lot more need, therefore we have more food. Well, at first, it was kind of, you could call it serendipitous. You think about what happened to all the restaurants. They all had to shut down.
Right.
What happened to the food that was going to go to the restaurants? It had nowhere to go. So that became an immediate source of food, right? And then the community and the government saw, oh my gosh, the food banks, they're just getting absolutely slammed. We need to get them food. We need to get them funds. And so we were able to then ramp up. And then we had to just change our techniques. We went to, first thing we did is we went away from the classic pantry style setup where you go inside, because people didn't want to go inside. So we went to a trunk model, where you had the car, it was like a curbside, right? And then in order to do the kind of volume, we ended up doing these huge distributions. We called them super sites, where we'd handle as many as 10,000 people or families at once. So this is the ones that created these crazy scenes. It wasn't the best way to do things, but it was the only way we could come up with to do that kind of volume that fast. So there were just a lot of adjustments for us to make, until things started to calm down. Employment, started picking back up. Wages started picking back up. It was an interesting phenomenon for us when they were generally the hospitality industry and other historically low-paying industries couldn't get people to come back unless they raised their wages. That was good for us, because that was then it was like, oh my goodness, now they're getting enough money to not need us, which is awesome. And then of course inflation kicked in and kind of ate that up. But anyway, so now where I think all the food banks are, we're actually doing a lot more volume than we were pre-pandemic. And it's not so much that I think that need is higher than pre-pandemic. I think people are overblowing that. We've simply been seen as more reliable as a viable source when a family is struggling. They're more likely to trust us. Yes, we will get you enough food that this is going to make a meaningful difference for you to get by. And then there's so many donors that now trust us as, wow, y'all will really step up when the need is there. And so we do have more resources than we had pre-pandemic. So that's where we are now.
And then, can we talk a little bit about the Houston Foodbank expansion project?
Sure.
Okay. Why would you say that it's needed? Or starting off, what is it to begin with?
So several years ago, let me back up. So when we did this building, we projected out how much volume this building could do in food bank type distribution per year. So food banks, we don't get to order our food the way a normal distribution center would, where you can calculate out how much am I going to need in order to service my customers, and I'm just going to space that out. We get what people are willing to give us. Food companies are willing to give us when they're willing to give it to us. And if they say, look, we'll give you this, it's 6 tractor trailer loads, yes or no. You can't say, no, I want to get 4 pallets a week, for this period. No, it's like, it's yes or no. So you take these huge surges of product, so we have fairly low turn rate. So this facility basically was calculated out to be able to do 120 million pounds per year of output, which a regular distribution center like this was a Cisco, why they'd go broke. Now, we could do it if Cisco and the others would just trickle the food in like they do themselves, but that's not our world. So anyway, so we built this, and at the time, that seemed like a crazy number. That was like 4 times where we were when we were coming up with this. So 30 million pounds, 120 million pounds. Oh my gosh, that's 10 years from now we projected that we would basically start to cap out the building. Well, Then we got to 10 plus years afterwards, and oh my gosh, we capped out the building just like we thought we would. Now what are we going to do? And then so Boston Consulting Group volunteered to kind of like do some analysis with us to figure out what are our options here. And what we realized that probably the most cost-effective thing to do would be to add a second facility.
Okay.
Now, normally in the logistics business, that's not a smart way to build. You know, 2 facilities to serve the same area is not what you want to do.
Right.
But just the cost to do another one that would be twice the size just didn't make sense. So we decided we're gonna do that, but then we've learned so much about how we see our work that we wanted to do it different. First off, that it's going to be a very produce heavy, perishable heavy facility. But bigger than that, because we learned that so much of our effectiveness, not just distributing food, but trying to maximize our impact, means servicing other missions that are not, you wouldn't think they're the same, they're related, but they're serving the same people. But we want those missions to succeed to shorten our line. So in the new facility, we're actually going to bring back a good number of those partners in the building.
Okay.
So there'll be a health clinic, dental, mental health, employment, legal aid, college prep, just a number of like early childhood, pregnancy services, all in one building where the food is actually somewhat bait, draw people in, but also a support resource for those families in those programs to keep them in those programs so that they complete and then have better outcomes. So that's being designed into the building. The other thing that's being designed into the building is the opportunity to bring people together. So the food banks have accidentally developed an incredible resource that we're just now realizing what the potential of this is. We work with hundreds of thousands of families in this food bank alone they're struggling, right? They've got dreams, they've got, they got lives, they've got all things going for them, they got things they want to be able to do, and they're food insecure, okay? So it's huge how many people we work with. On the flip side, we had over 90,000 volunteers last year alone, unduplicated, come here to volunteer. So we have these 2 absolutely massive, unequaled population flows that we work with who don't see each other that much.
Right.
And you think about divided America, what is wrong with us these days? We are so us-them that it's keeping us from being able to solve problems. As rich as this country is, you would think that we would be able to have an economy that works without having poverty, right?
Right.
It is so unnecessary now. But we can't agree on how we will do things. And we just say, that's not going to happen if we can't get people together and talk to each other as people. We're in a neat position to try and help facilitate that. Because we have so many people that work with us and they trust us, they like us, they'll engage with us and say, okay, let's make this facility a place that, they'll not only come to volunteer, they'll not only come to get food assistance, but they'll stick around. So we're offering programming. We're going to have a food hall there. A YMCA is going to be part of the building.
Nice.
Yeah, so they can, you got a reason to play soccer and basketball and, hang out together and then try and facilitate discussions and see if we can't start to see how we get people together.
Right. And
we hope that this becomes something that kind of gets built upon around the country.
So I think in my mind, whenever I hear the word food bank, I think, okay, like this is a place where you're going to be able to get like a good meal or like a hot meal, or you're going to be able to beat food insecurity. But I feel like I don't really think of all of the other resources that you guys offer. How is it that you guys let the communities know, like, hey, we're so much more than just a food bank, or so much more than just a place where you can get something to eat? Like, how do you get the whole like, clinic and like YMCA and like all of these programs that bring everyone together?
Well, mostly we don't.
Okay.
That might sound weird, but mostly we work by supporting other organizations.
Right.
So we don't need to. Hey, look at us! We do this. It's like no. We don't need that. We're trying to help that clinic, that college readiness program, that tutoring service. Whatever it is, and so we want them to stand up.
Right.
The only thing that makes it different in this case is we are going to bring all these different programs into one building, and it'll be a very public building because we'll have all these volunteers flowing in through there, so they'll actually see these organizations. quite frankly, I think that's what's going to get the word of mouth out about
Right.
about the services that will be there.
Okay. And then we work with so many small to medium-sized businesses. What is it that they can do to really help out here in the food bank or their local food banks? Because not all of our customers are here based in Texas or here in the Houston area.
Yeah.
So what is it that they can do for their food banks?
Yeah, so Feeding America has a website that gives you a search engine so you can find the food bank that serves your area. I mean, we all do this.
Right.
So those food banks, yes, absolutely. You know, it's the surplus food that is our fuel that makes a food bank work. But we're also volunteer machines. There's so many of these donations we receive, something has to be done, and so like in this one's case, we can have up to 1,000 volunteers at a time. This facility was built to do that.
Right.
So like if your company wants to have like an employee engagement day or something like that, it's like, well, that's a pretty good place to do it. And also you can kind of learn a bit about the organization when you do so. But the easiest way to identify the food banks is to go to the Feeding America website, which is feedingamerica.org.
Okay. And then how could just like the everyday person get more involved?
The number one thing, when people ask the question, how can I get involved? The best entry point and the most valuable thing for most people to do is volunteer. So like at this food bank, we've calculated out if you work in, say, our carousel room, where we have to sort through the damaged goods from the grocery stores. It's a pretty efficient process, pretty fun. It's kind of like working in a factory. But the average wholesale value per volunteer net gain to the community is $75 an hour. Okay? So most people don't make $75 an hour.
Right.
So literally an hour of your time is worth more than you giving us an hour of your income in terms of impact to the community.
Right.
So that's a great place to start because you'll get great value for your time, but then you also learn the organization and you figure out how I might do more.
Okay. And then I think we've touched on everything that we have to touch, but I just wanted to give you the chance to kind of like share the Houston Food Bank message to end on that note.
So as part of our evolution of our thinking, when we realize that we will never food bank our way out of hunger, let alone food insecurity. And so we realize, though, that we do have an opportunity to try and help bring about real change in people's lives today, but also ultimately, where do we want to be? And so the board adopted a vision. So the board adopted a vision of a world that doesn't need food banks. And we really think that that's what our big challenge is. And I can say that throughout the Feeding America system, I think everybody's thinking like that is, we just got into this thinking that, man, look at all this surplus food and here's this need and we're just going to make it all work. And we now realize, yeah, it's great what we're doing, but we as a society can do better. And I think that's what we really want to work on.
Well, thank you so much for all of the great information, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing all of your great insights. And thank you for joining us on this episode of SNEED-CAST.
Thank you very much, Alexa. Appreciate your time.
Alrighty, and remember everyone, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell down below to stay up to date with all of our great updates, and make sure to keep an eye out for this episode Thanksgiving week. So we'll see you then. Bye everyone.